When you think about D-Day, what comes to mind? Right, it's the heroism on the beaches, the sheer guts of individual soldiers. But what if I told you the battle was pretty much decided long before the first boot even hit the sand? What if the real story wasn't just about bravery, but about brutal, overwhelming math? That the war was really won, not on the beaches, but in the factories thousands of miles away.
So, picture this. It's the Normandy coast, pre-dawn, June 6th, 1944. For the German soldiers on watch, it's just another cold, quiet morning. The big storm from yesterday has passed. The sea's still a bit choppy. Honestly, nobody is expecting a thing.
And let's zoom in on one man, Oberleutnant Klaus Richter. He's a pragmatic 32-year-old artillery officer. He's a veteran of the Eastern Front, so he's seen it all. He's tired, he's observant, and he is about to witness something that's going to completely shatter his understanding of war.
As that first little hint of light starts creeping over the horizon, Richter sees something. Something that isn't the tide. And it's definitely not a weather front. It was something that felt, well, impossible. Something his mind, at first, just refused to even process.
He raises his powerful Zeiss binoculars, and you can just imagine his heart starting to hammer against his ribs. Because this wasn't just a few ships. No way. It was a line that just kept getting sharper and multiplying. A solid mass of dark, menacing shapes that seemed to literally bend the horizon.
And that was his realization. He wasn't looking at some attack force. He was looking at a floating metropolis sailing right out of the mist. It was so huge, so immense, it felt like an insult to logic itself. Now, to put this into perspective, German intelligence, they were predicting a force of maybe 3,000 ships tops. What Richter actually saw was an armada of nearly 7,000 vessels from 8 different nations. He wasn't just facing an army, he was facing a logistical miracle, a math problem he had absolutely no way to solve. So when Richter frantically gets on the phone to headquarters, you know what they tell him? They dismiss him. Your reports are wrong, they said. The entire chain of command was just paralyzed by a total failure of imagination. All their plans, their maps, their intelligence, it was all being erased by the reality that was floating just a few miles offshore. So, why the disbelief? I mean, how could they get it so wrong? To understand that, we need to kind of zoom out and look at the whole German mindset. The psychology behind this thing they called Fortress Europe. See, in all the propaganda, the Atlantic Wall was this unbreakable shield. But guys like Richter, the professional soldiers on the ground, they knew the truth. It wasn't a wall. It was a patchwork, full of gaps, blind spots, half-finished bunkers. It was a fortress built on a foundation of lies. And the Germans' biggest mistake, it was all about geography and assumptions. They were absolutely certain the invasion would come at Pas de Calais. You know, the shortest point across the channel. So that's where they put their best troops, the 15th Army, thinking Normandy was just a feint.
But here's the thing. This huge miscalculation wasn't an accident. Oh no. It was the direct result of Operation Fortitude, maybe one of the most brilliant deception campaigns in military history. The Allies literally created a ghost army, complete with inflatable tanks and fake radio chatter, all to keep German eyes glued to the wrong spot on the map.
And then, that brilliant deception was helped by just pure chance. That big storm on June 5th, it led German forecasters to declare that an invasion was impossible for days. It got so relaxed that Field Marshal Rommel, the guy in charge of the defenses, felt secure enough to go home to Germany for his wife's birthday. The entire command structure was basically taking a day off. But the blindness of the German command wasn't just about clever tricks. It was a symptom of a much, much bigger problem. Because while the surprise on the beaches was tactical, the outcome of the war, that was strategic. And it was being decided far from any coastline, in a war of factories that Germany had, frankly, already lost.
So, let's ask that question. How was this all decided before the first shot was even fired? Asking this completely shifts our perspective. It forces us to look past the battlefield and into the engine rooms of the war. And the answer? Well, it's in the cold, hard numbers.
Just look at this. The disparity in the skies is absolutely insane. On D-Day, the Allies flew over 14,000 individual air missions. The German Luftwaffe, they managed about 300. That's a ratio of more than 40 to 1. The Allies didn't just have air superiority, they owned the sky, which made sending any German reinforcements to the battle, well, pretty much a suicide mission.
And on the ground, guess what? It was the exact same story.
This table really shows you two totally different ways of thinking. Germany was all about these complex, technologically perfect tanks. The US, they focused on one thing, just overwhelming quantity.
Just let that number sink in for a second. Over 29,000 tanks from one country in a single year. This wasn't a battle of production anymore. It was an industrial avalanche, a wave of steel that Germany simply could not stop. This one number tells you the whole story.
And it all comes down to this classic debate, quality versus quantity. Yeah, the German Tiger tank was a masterpiece of engineering, a truly fearsome weapon. But for every single Tiger that rolled off the assembly line, the Allies were stamping out dozens and dozens of the simpler but brutally effective Sherman tanks. See, their plan was never to outfight the Panzers one-on-one. It was to simply bury them under a mountain of steel.
Okay, so let's bring all these huge abstract numbers back down to the human level, back to Oberleutnant Richter in his bunker. For him, this whole industrial equation was no longer a theory. It was a physical, terrifying reality staring him right in the face.
When the order to fire finally came, Richter's guns did their job. They were good. They even scored a direct hit on an American destroyer. And for one single fleeting moment, his men cheered. It felt like a real battle. But the fleet, it didn't even flinch. The gap in the line was just filled. The endless parade of ships just kept coming. It was like trying to empty the ocean with a bucket.
The human cost of facing this industrial machine was just horrific. The German 352nd Division, which was Richter's unit, they fought like lions on Omaha Beach. But by the end of the day, they'd suffer around 1,200 casualties. That's a huge portion of their force, just erased in a matter of hours.
And this really captures Richter's final chilling epiphany. All their training, all their discipline, all their courage, it was meaningless. They were just tiny cogs in a contest that was already over before it began. The outcome was never really in doubt.
Look, the story of D-Day is and always will be a story of incredible bravery. But when you look at it from this other angle, it's also a stark reminder that in modern war, willpower and ideology can just be crushed by the sheer, cold, unstoppable weight of industrial power. It leaves us with a tough question, doesn't it? When the factories of nations go to war, what chance does one soldier in a foxhole really have?